Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. I am Jason Malicki, and I am the marketing leader for Value Scout. We are going to give people a few minutes to roll in here before we get started. So while you wait, I am going to put a poll on screen to get us give you something to do while you wait. Bear with me for a sec. So those of you who are waiting till we start, feel free to answer our poll. And when we start out in about 3 or 4 minutes, we'll share the results. All right, let's do this thing. So I'm going to share our poll results. Actually, they're fairly encouraging, Mark. Most people are in the pretty good category when it relates to planning. 56% say that they have market and account targets, but don't plan individual selling activities, which will be a big part of our talk today. So, and some of us are honest at least and say, terrible, what's a plan? So I appreciate that some of us were at least brutally honest about the reality of where we are. So, all right, so let's just jump into this. So super excited to have Mark here. So I've known Mark for over a year now. He describes himself as a fractional sales manager for fractional salespeople. I first met him last March when I had him on our podcast to talk about the pipeline cliff, which is a concept that he talks a lot about, something we can all relate to, but many of us maybe hadn't pinpointed, and he really is good at doing that. I love the way he looks at the world of selling, especially in advisory firms or professional services firms. And I just am super excited to have him here today. So Mark, I appreciate you taking us into this world of sales planning. And I like to call it bringing Fortune 500 sales discipline to a small advisory practice. So I'm going to hand it to you, get out of the way, and let you take over. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks to Dan Duran and the other team members at Value Scout. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you could take the time to join us today. As Jason mentioned, I bill myself as a part-time sales manager for part-time salespeople, and I will. Here's kind of what that is, right? A sales manager and a fractional sales manager has two main functions in an organization, and I'm just going to talk about kind of the work I do just for a sec here, just a couple slides. The first thing is a sales manager develops and manages your sales function in your organization. And the other thing, a sales manager builds skills and confidence through team and individual training. A fractional sales manager just does this a little bit at a time in a part-time fashion, very similar to a fractional CFO or CMO. Those types of positions. This is delivered in person, in groups, virtually one-on-one, or any blend of the two. When we get back to that in-person thing, that will be a component of it. So it's a very flexible tool, and it's focused on specific practitioners who do not view sales as their full-time job. That's kind of what I do. I focus specifically on working with professional services firms who, for the most part, do not have full-time sales people or full-time sales teams or full-time sales managers. So that's my work. So we're going to talk about sales planning. And I know that planning and sales is not one of those things that's really exciting or engaging, but we're going to talk about it today. Plans, for me, plans aren't necessarily those big 3-ring binders that go and gather dust on the shelf. Plans are, from my perspective, particularly sales planning, because sales requires a little more speed and agility. I'm going to outline 4 different kind of levels or typologies of sales planning or sales plans. And we can dig into that a little bit, but let's kind of break these things down, right? Let's talk about planning and let's talk about sales, and then we'll kind of get into it. So planning, and this is not foreign to any of you, planning helps us organize and prioritize our activities. It reduces confusion and ambiguity, and that's a really important element of this. It increases your confidence, particularly if you're operating in an area like sales that is not your core competency. We create repeatable and measurable processes that can be assessed and improved over time. That's critical. Any form of process improvement needs that. And it doesn't guarantee, but it increases the likelihood of successful outcomes, right? That's planning. Despite all of these things, when it comes to planning, sometimes this little guy shows up, right? It's the distractions. It's the busyness of today. It's maybe a in sales, maybe it's the new client versus the existing client who you really don't want to pay attention to anymore. And so there's myriad distractions that can happen when we try to plan that can disrupt that. So this is a little friend, I think, that will come to visit us again later on in our presentation. So let's talk about sales, right? So I want to clarify what sales is and sales is not. I think a lot of times in professional services firms, particularly, we confuse sales and marketing. So let me kind of clarify, at least from my perspective, what those things are. I consider sales the collection of one-to-one interactions and activities by individuals to find and win work. So that one-to-one thing is really important here. Sales is not marketing, which is one-to-many. Your marketing team connects with an audience through these kind of one-to-many tools, through websites, social media, newsletters, et cetera. And also, sales is not pushy, slimy, tricky, or deceitful. We're kind of working through this decades-old hangover of fill in the blank, used car salesman, whoever, that is no longer the case. And I'll get into that a little bit. And sales is not this, right? Sales is not the charismatic individual who says, look, I just need to get that lead in the door, that prospect in the room, and I'll close the deal, right? This is not the mindset that leads to a successful salesperson. Now, some of you have come across this person and maybe they're quite good at it, but frankly, the majority of experts out there that you are, whether you're in valuation or financial advisory, wealth management, I work with engineers and architects as well, any of those folks, these people are pretty rare in those types of organizations. Typically, you've got experts who are very good at their craft and less so at sales. Now, here's the point I want to make about sales. Sales has changed forever because information is everywhere and options are endless. The access to the internet, Googling anything you'd like, and the increasing amount of options and competition, not just firms that do exactly what you do, but just different ways of maybe managing your finances, doing that completely online without ever having any human interaction. There's just different ways you can go about it. So there's different options out there. So because these two reasons, sales has changed forever. What this has done, however, because of the abundance of information and the endless options, it has put your buyer into this situation, right? Where actually purchasing your services is confusing. It is entirely possible that you have prospects right now that you are talking to have very little clue what's happening, how to do this, and they've never purchased these services from your type of professional services firm before. And with the amount of information that they've come across through their research and the number of options that are out there, they're in a little bit of a fog. So sales is no longer pushy, slimy, deceitful, whatever else, because your buyer needs you to help them and your buyer needs you to be their guide. So now sales is helping, right? Sales is more about guiding prospects with a predictable process. Sales is about being forthcoming with information. It's about making sure that they know you have their back. It's seeking to understand their situation and what their needs are. It's providing valuable insights throughout the entire sales and the future engagement process. It's helping them to avoid bad decisions and pitfalls. Setting expectations is a way to kind of start to clear that fog a little bit. Setting timelines, setting next steps is a great way to bring more clarity to the situation. And sales is about having a plan, and we're going to talk about that right now. So there's 4 different types of sales planning, and Jason sort of alluded to that in that Fortune 500 organizations that have full-time sales teams, very robust sales organizations, full-time sales managers, do all of these things. They do them very well. They operate at a very high, very sophisticated level, and that's why they are successful. So here's the different sort of levels of planning. And we're going to talk about a couple of these today. We're going to talk about call plans, and call plans are preparing for these one-to-one interactions of any type, phone calls, video conversations, face-to-face meetings. Opportunity plans are focused on winning specific pursuits. This applies generally more to the complex sale, maybe more to business, where there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of decision makers, et cetera. Account plans that we'll talk about today as well a bit. Plans to grow specific client accounts, and we'll dig into a little bit of that. And the largest circle there is segment or territory plans. It's planning to grow similar groups of clients or client types, across an area of focus or particular experience or expertise that you have. So let's talk about account development plans first. And I want to define this sort of account thing just so I don't lose anyone here. So account development plans are focused activities around single client accounts to kind of grow in importance and grow your relationship with them. Here is the big why. Here's why we do these account development plans: to preserve and grow revenue and trust with our most important client accounts. And I'm going to define the term client because many of you may be in a situation where your clients are consumers, they're individuals, they're families, maybe not. Maybe most of your clients or all of your clients are organizations, businesses, and you tend to have much more complex sales. Either way, that client term that I use, that client account term that I use, can be very, very flexible. You can use it for client accounts. It can apply to partners. It can apply to centers of influence. It can apply to collaborators. Any type of organization where you have a need to develop and deepen relationships, yielding potentially increased referrals, an increased number of mutual clients. If you're a financial advisory firm and you're working very closely with a law firm, like a family law firm or attorney firm, maybe there's a really great opportunity to create a plan around that particular firm. So this is the core reason, and there's many more reasons why we do these account development plans. New opportunities with existing clients close faster with less effort and a lower cost of sale. That is critical. New prospects generally take longer and have a higher investment in internal resources. They avoid the various startup costs associated with new accounts. This is sort of from the sale to the contract to getting going. Just that sort of onboarding process can be very laborious for new clients. That prior experience helps us to be more productive and profitable with existing clients. We've done work before. Maybe we know them, so we know better ways to serve them where we can be more effective and more hopefully profitable. They tell a better story. We can pull a nice thread through the years that we've worked together. And lastly, they allow us to create these tighter, longer lasting human connections. I think, it's as human beings, we all seek to develop these deeper, closer human relationships, even, obviously personally, but obviously even in business as well. So despite all of these reasons why account development plans are really important, our little friend often shows up, right? It's the new client prospect. It's like I hinted to earlier, that existing client account that you've had a really hard time with hasn't gotten any easier, and you're kind of distracted with that. You don't want to do an account plan because maybe something came up. Maybe there was an issue that arose months ago or years ago that was never really resolved, and there's not a lot of incentives for you to continue kind of these working with them. Who knows? So let's talk about what they are. The account development plan, what it is. It's a focused team activity focused on a single account. It could be, like I said, a COI, a partner, whoever. It's a proactive effort to learn, explore, and engage. It's a medium duration exercise. It's longer than a few weeks. It's probably less than a year or so. So it's some months of work. It's designed to spark some activity for new prospective work. And it's a comprehensive effort, really, that takes a really broad look at the client account, and you bear complete responsibility for this. Your clients are not expecting you to sit down and do kind of a comprehensive account plan around them. They're just not expecting you to do that, but this can help both of you in the end. Account development plans are not a check the checkbox effort with no conversations, no goals, no actions and no results. This is not an opportunity for, just one more meeting that everyone gets together over the course of the month, and really nothing comes of it. They're not an internally focused exercise where you lock the door and come up with this plan on your own. These plans demand engagement with that specific client account, various conversations, et cetera. And we'll dig into that in just a sec. They are not uncoordinated efforts for lone wolves or individuals to kind of advance their own agendas. And they're not quick solutions for short-term revenue. These account development plans fall into the mid to long-term slots in sort of your revenue plans. Your short-term revenue plans should be the opportunities that are in your sales pipeline right now. And these account development plans fit months beyond that, or sometimes even, many months beyond that, as you look 12 months, 18 months out from your current pipeline. So here's what they look like, right? They're a collaborative effort. Like I mentioned, people get together. We can use mind maps. We can use Post-its. We can use different types of templates. I've got an example that I use. So they're just engagement tools for the whole team to participate in. So people and places is one of the important elements of account development plans. I'm not going to go through all of the elements because there's a ton of them, but I'm just going to highlight a few, right? We want all the internal team members to be part of this plan. We want all of the client team members that we've worked with identified, and even people that we don't know. We want other partners, other COIs that are sort of tangentially related, that sort of orbit in that universe around this particular account or partner. And when I list people in these plans, I like to assign kind of a relationship score. It's a little nuance there that really helps us start to sort who we know and who we don't know and how we're going to focus our time and efforts. Another important part of the account plans are, issues, the relationship. There's an elephant in the room. There might even be skeletons in the closet. But what we really need a good assessment of the client relationship in these plans. We need to uncover what indicators or evidence we have that support that. Maybe there's emails that are complementary or critical that we need to kind of dig up and make sure are represented in this plan. If there were issues that arose in the past, simple things that arise from, miscommunication or whatever, we need to surface those, we need to address them, and we need to set plans on how to resolve those issues. Another important parts, or this is actually multiple parts of an account development plan, priorities, preferences, and positioning. I put these kind of all together. Priorities have to do with your client's business objectives. And this you come to understand this through a conversation with that client account, with your close contacts there. Uncover their objectives, their biggest challenges right now, what their plans are for the next year or two. Coming to asking good questions, good open-ended questions about this helps you understand this. Understanding their preferences, why they decide to work with you as a consultant or as a partner. Why did they pick you over the competitors? What qualities or characteristics do they look for in general when they're looking, when they're working with partners or consultants or collaborators or whatever it is? And what things do they avoid? What things drive them crazy? Obviously, these are great things to understand about these important relationships you have. Positioning, where do they see you in the competitive landscape? I think all too often sort of this positioning exercise happens in our own heads. And I think this is a great opportunity to ask, these accounts where they see us in the world of similar firms. And through all of those things, we can come up with a unique selling proposition, which is our unique offer to that specific client account of how we can help them fulfill or meet their current business needs or business challenges, how we can make sure that we're kind of aligning with their preferences, and that we kind of understand where we sit in their universe of positioning and how they see us, and then we can serve them that specific way that others cannot. So, and obviously in an account development plan, we need a plan. We need objectives. We need short and long-term goals. We need to constantly revisit these goals to make sure we're chasing after the right things, that we've set our objectives against these goals appropriately. And we need to have owners with actions and check on that probably every month or so. So implementing these account development plans, this is just a quick little snapshot here of, what these templates look like. They're, how I implement them with my clients. We sit down with all of the internal account leaders and champions that are touching that important COI or that account. We complete as much of the plan as we can as possible, just with ourselves. But then obviously we have to have conversations with this account, with these contacts outside of that, to help us sort of flesh out the challenges, preferences, et cetera. We need to meet regularly, probably every month or so, plus or minus. And I often recommend that firms use some sort of a project or task management tool. If you have that, like Asana or Monday or Smartsheet, whatever tools that you can use to help guide your path on that. So that's excuse me, that's a quick snapshot about account development plans. We can answer some questions that all of you may have about those later on. So let's talk a little bit right now about call planning. Call planning is making the most of these high stakes conversations that we have, these one-on-one interactions with most likely, prospective clients. Here's the big why we do them, right? There's two big whys. We want to increase the likelihood of successful outcome, and we want to, remove that fog. We want to bring clarity to an often confusing situation. And I mentioned this previously. Despite the need to do this, to bring clarity to a confusing situation and to increase our likelihood of success, this little fella arrives again, right? We're 5 minutes in, prior to the scheduled call, you think, oh, I'm going to wing it. It's going to be fine. I don't need to be prepared with questions. All I'm going to do is I'm going to show up and I'm going to talk about ourselves. I'm going to talk about the work that we do, and it's going to be fine, right? This call is going to go great. Or maybe it's not that guy. Maybe it's this guy, right? You're just going to, who needs a plan, right? We're just going to, water's fine. We're just going to jump right in, right? So here's the call plan. Here's what it is. A call plan is a quick, very simple way to prepare for an important conversation. It's a great way to build your confidence. It's a tool to be used for most, but not all of your sales conversations. And it's a framework that changes over time. Some of your earlier conversations will have different plans than some of your later conversations. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. This is what it's not. This is not a way to kind of force your agenda on the person on the other end of the line. It's not a tool to prep for your presentation, your exhaustive, boring monologue about yourself. And it's not a waste of your time, right? This is a valuable tool that you can use to prepare. All right, let's talk about the elements of the call plan. All right, so there's six basic elements here in the call plan. One is a few reasonable objectives, and like I mentioned before, your objectives are going to change over time. Your objective on your earlier conversations, maybe it's an initial conversation just to kind of get to know someone, a qualification conversation maybe where you're trying to figure out if the two of you can be mutually successful together. This is the type of client that you might work with, that your services will fit their needs. Your objectives would be pretty simple. Get to know them, maybe build a little bit of rapport, and determine fit. You want to have some basic research. You're going to do your background research leading up to the conversation, maybe some online research, maybe looking at LinkedIn profiles, maybe looking at websites, recent articles, et cetera, just to sort of see what's going on in their world. You want to set a very, very basic call agenda so that you can sort of outline how you're going to move through this conversation with the person on the other end of the line. Again, being a guide, not controlling the conversation, but just guiding through this kind of sometimes unclear situation. The most important part, I tend to think, you want to have a handful of questions. Excuse me for a second. All right, let's get this back going here. All right, you want to have a handful of questions to ask. The questions should hopefully be kind of exploratory and open-ended in nature. The most important part, or the most important thing about questions, having questions to ask in any of your conversations, is that if you ask the right questions and if you ask good questions, the person on the other end of the conversation is going to do most of the talking, which is your goal. If you're the consultant or the partner and you're trying to understand their needs more deeply, you need to hear that from them. And I never learned a darned thing when I was talking. So the better questions that you have to ask, the better you'll be prepared for this conversation, the less talking you'll do. I tend to think if I'm going to be in a 30-minute conversation and I only talk for 5 minutes or so, I think that's a win. You want to have a client success story. And I refer to it as, a story to have in your back pocket ready to go. If you get to the point in the conversation where they want to know a little bit more about you and what you do, the best way to communicate that information is not a slide or a bunch of bullet points. It's a nice story that relays on the client and their situation, what their needs were, what you provided, as a valuable consultant, and what the ultimate results were that they achieved. That's a simple story. You should be able to tell that in, a minute or two, and it gives them a good idea of the work that you do rather than just listing a bunch of services that you offer. Okay, so and then the last thing, the most important thing, is next steps. And I'm going to make sure that I highlight this because the ultimate goal of any of these conversations is another conversation. And when those conversations are all done, hopefully you're going to have a signed contract in place. But you always want to make sure you're setting next steps, again, because you're a guide. There's a foggy situation. We want to clear the ambiguity. We want to bring clarity to this. So we want to set next steps. Setting next steps is sometimes uncomfortable in conversations because it doesn't feel like it's sort of a natural part. You say, great conversation. We'll talk soon, right? Without any kind of specifics with your next steps. Here's how I like to look at it. The discomfort that I might feel in the moment about kind of asking for a next step, a next meeting, let's get something on the calendar. The sort of discomfort that I might feel in that situation it pales in comparison to the discomfort that I feel 10 minutes after the conversation, 10 minutes after I've ended the video call or hung up the phone, and realize that we have no clear next steps together, right? That is a painful feeling in the pit of my stomach. So I think, well, rather than feeling that, I'm going to push for this next step in this next conversation just to make sure that we're going to keep moving. So this is this is a simple process. Again, how do you implement this? You get your call scheduled. You just don't sort of do a hypothetical call plan with someone that you might talk to someday. Get it on the calendar. Maybe it's in a week or 4 days or, whatever it is. Maybe it's in a month, but get it on the calendar, get it scheduled so you have a deadline to work towards. Take 20 or 30 minutes to work through the plan with a partner. My clients work through these with me. Individuals in firms, you are best served just working through this with sort of two heads in the game, because you're able to bring up better questions. You're able to explore a little bit more. So a partner is always really helpful. Have the call and stick to the plan. So many times we will have these great call plans that we've come up with. We've got a half dozen really great questions and we never ask them, or we just ask one of them. And we get confused and we don't bring the clarity that we should to the conversation. So it kind of goes off the rails a little bit. We want to always take notes. We want to make changes. We want to assess what we did during that call that can make the next call even better. So before I wrap up here, what I would like to do is just do a quick role play. And I'm going to have Jason kind of join in on this. I'm going to stop my screen share and Jason and I are going to go right into a role play. And this is, yes, you're going to pick up on this. This might be a little bit scripted, which is totally fine. But we're going to just play through a conversation. It's going to be short. It's not going to be a half an hour. We're going to do this really quickly. And we're going to just bring a little sort of, kind of reality to this conversation.
All right, man, let's do it.
Great. So here's, I'm going to play myself. So I've explained what I do. I'm going to be talking to Jason. Jason is the owner of a 20-person professional services firm. I've scheduled an introductory conversation with Jason, which is typically for me about a 30-minute qualification conversation. I talked a little bit about what that means before. Jason came across my LinkedIn profile. He read some posts. He read a particular post about sales planning. He visited my website where he filled out a form to get in touch with Jason. So here we are on a video call. Hey, Jason, great to meet you. Thank you for taking the time for this introductory call.
Yeah, happy to do it. I appreciate you getting back to me so quickly.
Absolutely. So you wrote in your note to me that you had read an article about sales planning. I'm really curious, what did you, I appreciate you read it in the first place. And I wanted to know what you found particularly interesting about that.
What grabbed my attention is just the section you had about call planning. I feel like our sales team, we don't do any call planning. There is no planning on that front. We're terrible. And I just, that idea of finding ways to make the calls that we schedule more effective has me intrigued.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hear that. From a number of people. And hey, I know you've got probably a whole bunch of questions about what I do and how I do it, et cetera. But I've got a handful of questions that I wanted to ask you. Kind of first off, does that sound okay?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Great, good. So tell me a little bit about your current situation at your firm. I'm kind of trying to understand who's involved. If you've got, kind of processes in place, and if you're generally successful at sales.
Process? What's process?
Yeah, right.
So we got a 20-person firm, right? And we don't have any full-time salespeople. We've got 3 partners that do the selling,
right.
But there's no governing process. There's no real agreement on a master process. Everybody kind of does their own thing, and everybody has their own way to sell in their own minds. Some of them are really bought in, some kind of do it reluctantly.
Yeah. So you mentioned you've got the 3 and the 3 folks the 3 partners that kind of focus on sales. How do you develop these new sales leaders, the up and comers at the firm?
Well, it's totally ad hoc. Honestly, we bring new people in, and it's kind of a eat what you kill environment, right? So we just kind of throw them a list and say, hey, go have at it. Let's go make something happen, right?
Right.
And so I can tell you up front, it's not working real well.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. That makes total sense. So here's an interjection here. I typically ask Jason a handful more questions, being very mindful of the time that we've got. My goal here is in this qualification conversation is determine fit. Whether or not we can work together. It sounds so far, like this is possible. To me, in my mind, the research I did before, sounds like Jason and his firm would be a reasonable fit. So we've asked some questions here, and maybe Jason gets to a point where he's a little bit curious about my firm. So go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, this is all interesting, Mark, but I think where we're struggling. So, but how can you help us? What can you do to help us kind of get unstuck here?
Good. I think it's a good question to ask. I mentioned earlier, I knew you'd have questions about what I do. Rather than giving you kind of a bullet list of all the services I do and getting into the details, I've got I've got an example, of a firm that might be similar to, and it's similar to your firm and to you, and this might resonate to you. Would that be okay if I kind of shared that? Great. So I currently work with a professional services firm here. I'm in Seattle, about a 30-person firm, so maybe just a little bit bigger, but kind of in that ballpark of your firm. Very similar. They got 3 partners. One has actually retired fairly recently. One's kind of half 1 foot out the door, 1 foot in the door. They started their firm over 20 years ago, and then there's a younger partner in the firm as well. And that younger partner has just started looking across the firm, trying to figure out, who are the future leaders and sales leaders specifically, who's going to be replacing the revenue that these previous, partners were sort of responsible for. They were entrepreneurs. They knew how it worked. They knew how to generate business. Who's the next generation? So that's their challenge. And I started working with him about 2 years ago, and we've got them organized. So we've got an organized sales pipeline. So we understand, we can sort of look ahead at we've talked about, what they currently have in the pipeline, how to advance those new opportunities, what opportunities are a little bit further out. And about the developing sales leaders, I work with everyone in the firm one-on-one, work with senior leaders all the way down to some of these young up and comers, and I coach them individually. We get together as teams as well, but each one sort of has their own path to development. And now 2 years later, that senior leader who's really scratching her head about who this next team is coming up, she's got really good visibility and great clarity on, 2 or 3 or maybe 4 people who are, going to embrace this revenue generation role, this part-time salesperson role. And she's way more confident about it. And she's seeing really great development from those people. So hopefully that makes some sense and that resonates with you.
Total sense. So where do we go from here? I mean,
great.
What's next?
No, I'm happy. I'm happy you mentioned that. It seems as though, this at a minimum, it's good for another conversation. A subsequent conversation past this, I'd like it to be a little bit longer. Maybe we can dig into the details a little bit more about your firm. We can talk about the specific individuals, how many, who I might be working with, et cetera. Yep. And I'll also share a little bit more about my process. You can gain a little bit more clarity about that and maybe have a couple things to show, et cetera. So you can start to get a clearer picture on all of that. Do you have some time in the next week or so where we could set up a conversation?
Absolutely. How about next Thursday?
Great. Perfect. Let's do it next Thursday, 1 o'clock. Perfect. So that's our little role play right there. Here's what I did, right? So I sat down, did my call plan ahead of time. I did my research on Jason's website. My objectives were to get to know him, build a little bit of rapport, obviously set a next call, and to kind of determine fit. Those are my call objectives. The questions you heard, I had a few there. There's other questions that I ask in a qualification capacity. And obviously we set a next step on that. So I kind of checked the check boxes on all of my call plan goals. So that's the call plan, little example right there. And Jason, what did we want to do now? Do we want to do that?
Well, the first question is, did I capture the essence of what selling looks like in most professional services firms? What do you think? And everybody can chime in on chat if they choose, but is that what it's like?
Right. Yeah. And, scripting it, a lot of people say, oh yeah. They don't all go like that. And you're absolutely right. There is some ambiguity and variability and all of that. But if you plan, you can start to work out, kind of start to remove more and more of that confusion and lack of clarity. So,
well, let's do this. Let's bring the slide deck back up briefly. I want to just encourage people. This is kind of our Q&A window. So I encourage anybody that has a question to please type it into the Q&A, and I will help, Mark work through them. I think, Mark, it was fabulous. But as people have a chance to do that, I want to just, first off, encourage them if they have questions about Mark and what he does and how he does it. I encourage you to reach out to him directly. Obviously, here is his contact.
Yeah, that's me.
And then here's what's coming down the pipe, just kind of let people know. Our next 3 events that are coming down here, we've got one on leveraging human capital. So we're going to talk about just getting the right people in the right places, doing the right things in order to drive value creation strategies. We're going to do an open demo in early June. One of the things we found is that we're getting a lot of demo requests, and so we're going to try to do one open-ended for anybody that wants to attend, and a live kind of open setting of seeing how Value Scout works and how it helps you drive value creation work. And then we're going to do building a high performance sales machine, which is a little bit different than what we do today with Mark. What was really cool about with Mark is he's talking about how we as advisors can sell better to grow our firms, to grow our practices. James is actually sort of a veteran Fortune 500 a guy who's been through multiple exits and has built large, high performance sales organizations inside of your client companies. So he's going to join us and talk about how to do that and give us a roadmap for that. And then last but not least, of course, that's the story about Value Scout, the world's first value creation platform. I loved that, a lot of what Mark talks about dovetails with what Value Scout tries to do in the value creation world, which is help value advisors develop value creation plans and roadmaps and execute against them. So it's just such a great dovetail. So I encourage you to type your questions into the chat or the Q&A. I have one before I let other people jump in, Mark, that I'm going to throw at you real quick. So the first thing that jumps out to me is it's like, I'd be shocked if anybody on this call said to themselves, yeah, I don't believe that preparing for a sales call makes any sense. I think it's a waste of time. But my other guess is that they often just don't do it. So how do you change behaviors? I mean, how do you get advisors who are used to showing up 2 minutes before the call and think I can walk in and I'll figure it out, to take the time necessary to plan for that interaction? What's some suggestions you have there?
Right. It takes giving it a shot. It takes, because if you've done some planning work and you've been successful at it, then you'll do more, but you're never going to, embrace call planning or any other type of planning for sales if you never give it a shot, or, if you're, here's the thing. I think most people will wing it and they'll be moderately successful. They don't really understand. They don't have anything to contrast it with. So, you have to start practicing and trying it first off and start seeing some success. If you have particular questions you use in your qualification conversations or your subsequent conversations that, give you the results you want or increase your success, then it just starts to build upon itself.
So I have another question that follows from that, which is that, so how, I'm sure some people are thinking to themselves, if I plan this interaction, is it going to feel planned? And now it's not going to feel, natural and off the cuff. How do you keep that from happening if you're working from a plan?
Right. I honestly, I don't think that off the cuff is really sort of a place where we, we'll succeed. I don't think it's a place where we want to be. I think that, look, your prospective clients will want to understand that you approach your profession and your work in a very organized fashion, that you have your stuff together, right? And why not start early on in the sales process, right? You don't want to give the impression that you haven't prepared, that you're just sort of doing this off the cuff. And then all of a sudden you're going to flip the switch. When you start working together, it's going to be tightly orchestrated, very, very organized, because, all of these practices require a lot, when post-contract, they require a lot of rigor and organization in order to do it really, really well. So you might as well start that now in the sales process. Plus, as I mentioned, the buyer a lot of times is in the fog about how to proceed. They don't know what the clear next steps are. And it's up to you to set that, to be the guide in the process.
Yeah, I love what you said. I mean, I people probably don't know this, but I lead marketing at Value Scout. I also own a marketing agency, and we've got an arc of a sale that we use. It's multiple conversations, and every one of those is scripted, and we know exactly what questions we want to ask, when, and how, and why. And it's liberating. Actually, I found is when you have that plan, it improves the quality of the interaction because you know what you need to get, what information you need. So. Yep. Question from Sarah here. So Sarah says, ours is a B2B situation, which I think is true for virtually everybody. Developing referral sources. You mentioned the COIs. Yeah. Some we've had for years. Does it make sense to try to use these steps to infuse new energy into those relationships?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've got a current client who's in a very similar situation. When you dig scratch below the surface a little bit on that relationship, they come to find that, maybe it's, those two firms are, let's say they've got 20 people each or 50, whatever it is, however many number of people, you come to understand that there's only one person in each firm that really have any type of relationship. Yet there's so many other people there that could benefit from getting to know each other, increasing the number of referrals and shared clients they have. And a lot of times you'll find that it's the two owners or founders that have that tight relationship and none of the other folks in the firm. So they are wonderful opportunities in that sort of account development planning process to introduce the kind of up and coming, get the second generation of people to get to know each other, because there's only so much that one relationship between the two founders or owners is going to produce. It can be very fruitful, but getting the others involved in the conversation and helping them build their relationships is really, really powerful. And we're seeing, I've got a client now that, it's a financial services client, and they've developed a really great account development plan focused on one of the COIs they work with. They're introducing new team members to their younger team members. They've got a multi-part series where they're going to be sharing sort of their client experience, what it's like to work with them, the process they go through with their clients. The other firm is going to be doing the same thing. So the firms can increase their shared knowledge of each other. And the hope is we've got some very specific goals. In the last 12 months or so, they've only had one referral kind of go back and forth. And we said, look, and very conservatively, we can triple that. We probably even can, I don't know, 5, 10, who knows how many referrals they can start to share. So yeah, absolutely. Works great.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about when you talked about planning, our own financial advisor in our own life. I've talked to him. He does exit planning work, and so I've talked to him about it. And he said the way he approaches is literally an account planning exercise. So every year he looks at the client roster, and he says, "Okay, let's look up and down this roster and see what I know about these clients and where they are in their careers and where they are in their journey. And I'll prioritize the ones that I know are coming to a point based on my conversations with them over years."
Right.
Towards transition. And that's how I start that conversation. So let me ask Eric. So Eric had a question on chat. I just saw it. I apologize, Eric. It's a little bit long. I'll try to summarize it. So he said, basically, how do I position getting needed info back from prospects? So a lot of times, I need data, information, paperwork. I need a lot of things from the prospect to move things forward. But they're really busy people. So suggestions on how to make that easier so I can facilitate next steps.
Right. And I, from my experience in that kind of wealth management world, I know that the paperwork and the information, the data required up front is pretty significant. My general recommendation there is that, you need to bring that required information, those requirements to a prospective client in a very deliberate, sort of tapered fashion. We don't want to put any barriers in place. So it's good to have a qualification conversation, a get to know you conversation, a building rapport conversation first with putting no demands on the person on the other end of the line. I think you need to build a relationship there first, and then you can start asking things of them. If you're asking too much information up front, it's going to be a barrier. Plus, you're going to be doing way too much work because you haven't figured out if that's going to be a mutually beneficial situation yet. If you start requiring all the paperwork and come to find that this person is not going to be great to work with, both of you have done way too much work way too early. So, I think you need to take a good look at the amount of information that's required to do what you need to do, both pre-contract and post-contract, and layer that in as time goes on. And generally speaking, as they get to know you, they're more willing to provide more and more information. So we can't expect too much too early.
I have two questions, and one is about money. So how early is too early to start talking about money? What it's going to cost to work together?
Yeah, pricing. I generally don't think it's ever too early because it always comes down to it's always part of the conversation. So I think it's probably good early on in the conversation to say that we will talk about money at a specific time, and kind of leave it at that without getting into into too many details, Jason, you and I have been, seen a lot of information from a lot of different people, and, come to understand that, we have to price the client or the situation, and not the work to be done. So we have to come to an understanding early on exactly, how this is all going to fit together. But, it's good at a minimum, I'd say, to clarify at which point in this initial sort of sales process that you will talk about money. And do you tell them your exact, pricing up front? Well, it's hard because you don't have enough information at that point. I think it's good to just clarify, say, look, we will, once we have a very clear understanding, we're going to come back to you with our approach, and our approach is going to include how we'll work together. It's going to include, the price, and how we can kind of talk about those different layers. And I always make sure I mention that anytime I'm going to, talk through a price, I'm going to always include options. I say there is a price and there are options. So I think, that's a very sort of client, prospect friendly term. People want to have options. Buyers want to have options. So, and I know there's a lot of firms out there who may not be regularly providing options to their prospects or their clients. My recommendation is that they start to do so.
Yep, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
All right, so my last question is this. So imagine I'm a consultant, I'm a value creation consultant, or I'm a wealth manager, and I am just stuck. So I'm stuck on the new business front. I'm just not having any success. What would be your advice? What would be the first thing that you would look at to try to get unstuck? And in this situation, I'm assuming that the doors are getting opened, right? Like there are conversations happening, there are meetings happening. There's a lead gen model of some sort that's generating conversations, but man, we are just not getting those things to turn into revenue and work.
Right. That's part of developing some simple processes, evaluating them, looking at them over time, and then making changes as you go. I mean, that's what process improvement's all about. And the sales process is one of those processes. And, I think a lot of people treat each new prospect or each new opportunity in their pipeline as, just something green. It's brand new. I'm going to have to handle this one completely differently. And they don't create any successful or repeatable processes in that they can evaluate over time. I know that sounds a little sort of complex, but I think really what happens is we start doing different things every single time, and there's no commonalities between any of it. So we have no idea what's working, what's not working, how it's improving. What we know is we're just not closing enough business at the end of the day. So it all starts with just get it together. Start putting together some sort of process. When you're going to have an initial qualification conversation, have a list of really great, 15 qualification questions that you ask 5 of. Start using that list again and again and again, and improve it so that you're able to qualify the right clients in these early conversations and move them onto a discovery process. In your discovery conversations, be really clear about what you're going to ask and what you're going to share. So we're starting to build that process that will yield, results down the road. There's no silver bullet. There's no quick fix. There's none of that. Sales just aren't going to start to close themselves, particularly in a world where, like I said, there's more and more information and there's more and more competition and choices out there for the buyer. I think if we make this mindset shift of, we're going to sell, we're going to close, to, we're going to help, we're going to guide. That's a huge mindset shift on all of our parts. So.
Yeah, I love that. I think they're wise words to end on. So we are going to end on those wise words. So I want to thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom on sales planning and sales process. I think it's an incredibly important topic that all advisors really, I don't think there's an end to that journey of trying to build a better way to engage a prospect in dialogue, to get at their core wants and needs, to create change in their world. So a couple of kind of closing things here. So we will have the full recording from the webinar available on inside the Guide On community, which does require membership, but there is a free membership access. Mark will have multiple blog posts coming out reinforcing some of the things we heard today, along with a Loom video from his remarks inside of that session on the Value Scout website. I encourage you to reach out to Mark. I know he's going to provide some of his tools, his toolboxes to you to work with, I think. I'm not going to promise what they are, but I think he's going to do that. And then there was a question here. Someone would like to book a personal demo of Value Scout. I believe Alan dropped in the chat where to do that. It's at getvaluescout.com/demo. So if you want a personal demo of the platform, what it does, how it helps you drive your value creation and exit planning work, I highly encourage you to do that. And with that, I just want to say thanks again, Mark. It was awesome. Always great to connect with you and kind of hear your thoughts. And I always learn something. And thank you to you and to everybody who took their time out of their day to join us.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everyone who joined us today. And thanks, Value Scout.
All right, cool. See you, Mark.
Bye.